Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 6:06 here, hour number 2 on O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 6:35, George Fishman, Center for Immigration Studies. He's also the former Special Counsel for the Homeland Security Committee, so we'll get his analysis of what the Senate just did and the precedent they've set. They set a precedent. They set the precedent.
What is setted? What is that? Are you changing the words
I'm from the Midwest.
And
we make up words
and all this crazy
705 Lori Lowenthal Marcus, a mother of a Columbia University student concerned about anti-Semitism on that campus. They had a hearing yesterday. 735 Selena Zito, Washington Examiner, and 805 KT McFarland. That's Mercedes Schlapp correcting my grammar, and appropriately so. That's really your most important job here this morning.
Is that my job? I thought
that's your job.
It's better than babysitting you. That's always...
So, Joe Biden, yes, that's true. Joe Biden has lots of stories of his youth, as you know. He's grown up Black, Puerto Rican, Jewish, Irish, what other category is I think he's Muslim as well. He grew up in all these different communities. You just ask him, he'll tell you. And, of course, we know the story of Corn Pop is one of my favorites. Isn't it yours?
Yeah, walk me through the Corn Pop story.
Oh, you don't know the Corn Pop story? Or you know what?
I remember. It's been a while.
You got to hear him tell the Corn Pop story. We'll get the audio of Corn Pop in a minute.
Okay.
So you can hear him tell the story. And about how when he was a lifeguard, the little kids used to touch his legs and play with the hair on his legs under the water. That's part of the Corn Pop story, too. Well, but we have a brand new story. I have never heard this story. This is about his uncle who flew in the Pacific during World War II over New Guinea and apparently was eaten by cannibals. Here's Joe Biden in his own words yesterday on the tarmac in Pennsylvania.
Well, we called him Uncle Bozy. He was shot down. He was an Army Air Corps before there was an Air Force. He flew single-engine planes, reconnaissance flights over New Guinea. He had volunteered because someone couldn't make it. He got shot down in an area where there were a lot of cannibals in New Guinea at the time. They never recovered his body, but the government went back when I went down there and they checked and found some parts of the plane and the like.
All right. Now, there was a lot of noise in the background there, but I hope you got it all. He went down, Uncle Bozy went down in the plane, never recovered the body. Here he is. He told the same story earlier in Pittsburgh, by the way. Imagine having to, he has to go and give these addresses to audiences. The people who sit in the audience are all forced to be there by their union boss. Imagine having to sit there and actually pay attention to this. Here, listen.
And my uncle, they called him Ambrose Brosey, they called him Bozy. My Uncle Bozy was a hell of an athlete, they tell me, when he was a kid. And he became an Army Air Corps before the Air Force came along. He flew those single-engine planes as reconnaissance over war zones. He got shot down in New Guinea, and they never found the body because there were a lot of cannibals for real in that part of New Guinea.
So if I am to understand this story, Joe Biden's uncle, Uncle Bozy, was, well, I guess the most charitable way to put this is he involuntarily fed a bunch of starving natives in New Guinea.
That's what it seems like. How did this story come up? Was he like talking to his dead Uncle Bozy, and then like how he talks to these dead European leaders? He brings them up. Uncle Bozy's back.
This is a great point. Like you hear this story and you wonder, did somebody ask about this?
Exactly. Where does this? It comes from left field. It's Uncle Bozy visited, and he told me he was eaten by a cannibal.
I want to know what topic was being discussed where Joe Biden then said, that reminds me.
Let's talk to the steel union workers about this.
My Uncle Bozy got shot down in a plane over New Guinea and then got devoured by cannibals.
Maybe he was thinking about Haiti because that president from Haiti is like a cannibal. So maybe he made a link. They were giving him a briefing about Haiti. And then all of a sudden he's like, yeah, my uncle got eaten by cannibals. Although I like that Bozy name. How I have that dog named Hunter. Poor Hunter. I don't even know how he's still alive.
I know. You named your dog after Joe Biden's
I'm thinking the next dog
son.
I get is going to be called Bozy. What?
I said you named your son after Joe Biden's, your dog after
son,
Joe
my
Biden's
dog.
crackhead son. It's unbelievable.
I did.
Hunter Schlapp.
Hunter Schlapp.
Well, you could have named your dog Corn Pop.
Well,
And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Have you really not heard the Corn Pop story?
I have. I just don't remember. There's so many gaffes.
All right.
I
So
can't
we're
keep
gonna.
them
So
all
you've got.
clear.
So you've got the Uncle Bozy flying over New Guinea, crash landing in the jungles, and eaten by cannibals story. You know
Right.
that old story.
Yeah, exactly.
So now layer that in with Corn Pop.
I learned a lot, and I learned that it makes a difference. This was the diving board area, and I was one of the guards, and they weren't allowed to. There was a 3-meter board, and if you fell off sideways, you landed on the darn cement over there. And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys. And I did. And back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use, if you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, "Hey, Esther, you, off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off." Well, he came off, and he said, "I'll meet you outside." My car, these were all public housing behind it. My car, there was a gate out here. I parked my car outside the gate. And he said, "I'll be waiting for you." He was waiting for 3 guys in straight razors. Not a joke. There was a guy named Bill Wright, Mouse, the only white guy, and he did all the pools. He was the mechanic. And I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "Come down here in the basement where all the pool filter is. You know the chain, there used to be a chain that went across the deep end. And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up, he said, "You walk out with that chain. And you walk to the car and say, 'You may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head.'" I said, "You kidding me?" He said, "No, if you don't come back." And he was right. So I walked out with the chain. And I walked up to my car. And they had, in those days, you used to remember the straight razor. You'd bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in a rain barrel, get them rusty. And I looked at him, but I was smart then. I said, "First of all," I said, "when I tell you get off the board, you get off the board, and I'll kick you out again, but I shouldn't have called you Esther Williams. I apologize for that. I apologize, but I didn't know that apology was going to work." He said, "You apologize to me?" I said, "I apologize for that, not for throwing you out, but I apologize for what I said." He said, "Okay," closed the straight razor, and my heart began to beat again.
Corn Pop.
Are you serious? At least that's a little. That's more entertaining. I think that's when his brain was functioning
How
a
was
little
that
better.
more? Well, it was. That was actually like during the Trump
That was a
administration.
little. That was a little.
How is
there
that
was
more
humor.
entertaining than your uncle getting devoured by
Okay,
cannibals?
because people I'm sorry. When I heard that about the uncle getting possibly devoured by cannibals, I don't know. Like, that's insane. And his name was Uncle Bozy. I mean, who names their Uncle Bozy?
Uncle Bozy.
Do you want to be
eaten by
called
cannibals.
Uncle Bozy? Like, my girls
Yeah.
call you Uncle Larry. Like,
Could I get-
that's.
Can
come
I
on.
get some Uncle Bozy, please, with a side of mashed potatoes and gravy?
With a side of corn pop?
That's a side of a nice little roasted corn pop.
Oh my
By the
gosh,
way,
we're so in trouble. We're so in trouble. Like, our nation's in trouble. This is a serious situation.
no, we're not in trouble because that's what Joe Biden yesterday was telling boring stories to a crowd that was falling asleep about his uncle being devoured by cannibals. The day before, Donald Trump showed up at a bodega on a sidewalk in Harlem, and it sounded like this. And little children came up to him on the sidewalk, and it sounded like this.
You Trump! I love you, Trump! I love you, Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump!
In Harlem.
In Harlem.
I think we're okay. We got more on this. And Biden had more to do in Pennsylvania as he was campaigning. Honestly, all of this explains why he was in the basement 4 years ago. 6:15 WMAL.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live.
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Upgrade to a new walk-in shower from Long Baths. Call now to get your free estimate today.
Later this morning at the Chris Plate Show, President Trump cheered outside a bodega in Harlem while Democrats chant, "Death to America!" 9 a.m. on WMAL.
You Trump! I love you, Trump! I love you, Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump!
Meanwhile, Joe Biden in Pennsylvania.
And my uncle, they called him Ambrose Brosey, they called him Bosey. My Uncle Bosey was a hell of an athlete, they tell me, when he was a kid. And he became an Army Air Corps before the Air Force came along.
He was a hell of an athlete. You know, that gave him a lot of muscle tissue to sear on the fire there.
But you bring up a great issue, which is the fact that you see Biden. He is free to go to Pittsburgh. He's free to campaign. And what are they doing to Donald Trump? He's having to spend every single day in this ridiculous criminal trial that is a sham, that is being controlled by an authoritarian judge, Judge Merchant, who literally all he does is try to humiliate and destroy Donald Trump. Yeah. And yet Donald Trump is still able to go to the bodega, still able to go to Harlem. And then he goes and meets with the Polish president just yesterday.
Yeah, so, Trump Tower.
But come on, Larry, the emotional and stressful toll it is taking
of course,
on President Trump, what they are doing to that man is an outrage.
I understand, but you know, listen, whoever decided, okay, you can't travel and campaign, then we're going to go uptown, we're going to go to Harlem, we'll go to the bodega where Alvin Bragg prosecuted the owner for defending himself and his property, and suddenly a Trump rally breaks out on the sidewalks. The most brilliant political move I've seen in decades, frankly.
It is, but it's like the whole thing is so unjust. I mean,
of course it is. It's absolutely unjust, and him doing that demonstrates it even better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, and Joe Biden tried to recreate that. He went, instead of going to the bodega in Harlem, he went to a Sheetz in Pennsylvania, because Sheetz is kind of a big deal in Pennsylvania. He walked in. Honestly, it's kind of a visual. He just walks in there with his sunglasses on. Who wears sunglasses indoors, by the way, other than, you know,
a celebrity, maybe?
Bit of a douchebag.
You do it, I'm sure, because you're a celebrity.
That's true. And nobody said anything. It was the weirdest thing. It was like, can you imagine if Trump walks into a gas station or a Sheetz or a grocery store? It's you know, obviously the place would go nuts. He's just, there's nothing there.
And these are called OTR, so they're like off the record, like they're not on the schedule, like they put them on the schedule last minute, or they go in it, you know. So it's it's sort of an improv, like it's people might know,
there's not a day's worth
coming.
Of pre-planning and screening.
So you see the Secret Service always getting very nervous when the president's like, oh my goodness, they got to
do a very brief sweep.
But think about that. Compare the sheets with the gas station visit of Biden, with the Chick-fil-A visit from President Trump
Perfect
last
example.
week.
Yes, exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
It was like the employees couldn't get enough. It was such a connection with the people, and it just shows how Joe Biden he doesn't have it. And he's lost his way, and yet the Democrat Party keeps propping this man up, and they've got an immense war chest. And their goal is to take Donald Trump down. And it is. That's
all they can do. See, they can't win on the issues. They can't win on the personality. They can't win on the character of the president. So all they can do is destroy Donald Trump. Joe Biden in Pittsburgh, though, when he was delivering a speech to union workers, he tried to divide us again, this time over classes.
You heard me say it before. Wall Street didn't build America. The middle class didn't build America. And you guys built the middle class. Unions built it.
Did you follow that? Wall Street didn't build America, the middle class didn't build America, but you guys built the middle class, I guess is what his message was. He could barely make it out.
And then there's cannibals coming. I mean, I don't really know what to tell you.
Well, and then there was this gaffe, and we call them gaffes, but really it's just a sign of dementia. Remember, anytime you criticize him, it's because he has a stutter, okay? So here's his stutter coming through.
And I made it clear to Israelis, don't move on Haifa. It's just not, I mean... Anyway, I just look what we did recently when Israel was attacked.
So he made it clear to the Israelis to not move on Haifa. Haifa, I believe, is the third largest city in Israel. It is an Israeli city. So he was warning Netanyahu to not make a military move on their own city. I believe he meant Rafah.
Yeah, but this is what bothers me, Larry, right? So this is a huge mistake from the way he's speaking. He obviously, it's another gaffe, and the White House will cover up for him, and they'll be like, no, he was mistaken. So then they'll fix the transcript, because that's what they'll do, and then they'll go out and he says, no, this is what he meant. But this is happening time and time again. Just think about that. These are major foreign policy statements that President Biden is making, and yet the media barely, like the media doesn't barely cover it. It's kind of like, oh, he's talking about cannibals, and on top of that, he's making this huge gaffe on what Netanyahu can and cannot do in his own country.
The media is too busy camped out in front of the courtroom in Manhattan, interviewing jurors. My favorite is that they're interviewing dismissed jurors. So we're now going to interview someone who literally will have nothing to do with this story. Yes. So we're going to spend 20 minutes on that. Meanwhile, yesterday, Joe Biden announced higher tariffs on Chinese steel.
Iowa farmers have been crushed by his tariff war with China, and no one knows better than the folks in Iowa. He thinks that being tough is great. Well, it's really easy to be tough when someone else absorbs the pain.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was Joe Biden 4 years ago criticizing Donald Trump for doing exactly what Joe Biden just did. That's right. He criticized Trump for raising tariffs on China, and everyone was like, yeah, that's right. That's right. Trump and his tariffs. Now Biden's doing exactly the same thing and flip-flopping for his own political purposes. Great stuff, isn't it?
This is what's happening, where you have the fact that he's meeting with these steel workers, and so he's already talk about the auto workers. He's pretty much abandoned them because of his whole obsession with the EVs, the electric vehicles that a lot of Americans don't want to buy. And then on top of that, then you're talking about higher tariffs on adding higher tariffs on the Chinese, something that he didn't support in the beginning. But yet,
of course. Yeah, and he's doing it for political. Well, we're going to have Selena Zito, who knows everything about that part of the country, especially Western Pennsylvania. She'll be joining us coming up at 7:05 on this program. Oh, excuse me, at 7:35. And you're right. Here's the problem, though, Mercedes. Yes, he's thrown auto workers under the table and under the bus, but the UAW is endorsing him. Throw steel workers under the bus, but the steel workers union bosses will support him. He does whatever it takes to keep the union bosses in line, and they'll spend all that money getting the vote out. And meanwhile, the actual blue-collar workers and real Americans he doesn't care about. But it's important that we all know that Haifa is a city that the Israelis were going to invade, apparently, but Joe Biden kept them from doing that.
They're invading their own city. It's so bizarre.
And Joe Biden's uncle was devoured by cannibals in New Guinea. There you go. I wonder who the ambassador to New Guinea is. Boy, what a job they've got to clean things up today. 6:25.
Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:36 now on this Thursday morning in the nation's capital. Thanks for joining us. Coming up at 7:05, Lori Lowenthal Marcus. She's a mother of a Columbia University alum. You saw that hearing yesterday about anti-Semitism on that Ivy League campus. She'll tell her story about her child. At 7:35, Selena Zito, Washington Examiner, all about that Western Pennsylvania trip from Joe Biden. Remember, Selena is the one who called Pennsylvania for Trump in 2016. And then at 8:05, KT McFarland. It's Larry O'Connor with Mercedes Schlapp. And I'm sorry I outed you for naming your dog after Joe Biden's crackhead son.
It's totally fine. I out you all the time because you drive an electric vehicle, so we're fine.
It's not an electric vehicle. It's a Tesla. It's a kick-ass Elon Musk mobile. That's very different.
It's an Elon. It's like Batman mobile. What are we talking about?
That's right.
It's okay. My hunter is, at least my hunter doesn't misplace his laptop.
I don't think your hunter's done much hunting lately. George Fishman formerly served as the Special Counsel for the Homeland Security Committee. He's now with the Center for Immigration Studies as a senior legal fellow. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Fishman.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, when you think about a cabinet secretary being impeached, which is not a very common occurrence, but you look at Alejandro Mayorkas, and it seems like the case was pretty cut and dry and pretty clear that at the very least the Senate should have taken this seriously and had the trial so that they could argue their case. But Chuck Schumer didn't even do that. What did you make of yesterday's precedent-setting move?
It was precedent-setting in a horrible way. Senator Schumer claims that it was unconstitutional for the House to impeach Secretary Mayorkas, when in fact the President Biden's own Solicitor General told the Supreme Court when that the executive has a dramatic abdication of its statutory responsibilities, impeachment is an appropriate remedy. She told the Supreme Court that. President Biden's own Solicitor General told the Supreme Court it was constitutional. Senator Schumer says it isn't. It's a terrible precedent.
So what is next? Will Republicans then, do they basically have a green light to ignore any impeachment that's handed their way? And will they have the political will to take advantage?
That remains to be seen, but certainly any impeachment drive in the future by Democrats, Republicans can bring this up as precedent. You refuse to even listen to the evidence. You refuse to even hold a trial, which is likely your constitutional responsibility. Republicans could most definitely do that anytime in the future.
So, George, let me ask you, because obviously we knew that the Senate was not going to move forward with the trial or with the impeachment itself. What I think Republicans are at a point where they need to decide what's their plan. Are you surprised that Secretary Mayorkas hasn't resigned already? I mean, it has been one failure after another coming out of the Department of Homeland Security. One thing I've learned with these Biden appointees, they just don't leave. They just stay, although they're failing. Are you surprised?
Well, unfortunately, his refusal to adhere to federal law appears to be met with satisfaction. With that appears to be carrying out what President Biden wants. So it seems to be coming from the top. He's refusing. Mayorkas is refusing to fulfill his obligations to carry out the law that Congress passed, and that seems totally fine with President Biden.
So, meanwhile, what about the border? I mean, while all of this is going on, while this apparently impeachment process is now dead in the water, and listen, I hope Republicans use it as a political weapon. Tim Kaine should have to answer for this in Virginia, certainly. But the border is still a disaster. And what other legal recourse do Americans have, or do members of Congress have at this point?
One of the main drivers of the impeachment was that last summer, the Supreme Court essentially told Congress, told the state, told the American people that if Secretary Mayorkas refuses to enforce immigration law as required by Congress, they can't go to court to do anything about it. The only recourse is what the Supreme Court called dramatic remedies, such as impeachment. And so that was what was driving the impeachment. The Supreme Court itself said we're not even going to consider whether Secretary Mayorkas was violating the law or not. Even if he was, states, you don't have standing, despite all the harm that's being done to the states, being done to the citizen, to the populace of the states. It doesn't matter. You don't have standing to challenge the administration's, Mayorkas's refusal to abide by the law. The remedy are things such as Congress cutting off appropriations, Congress impeaching the secretary. That's what the Supreme Court said. And so if Congress is not going to use its appropriations power to forbid, through funding, prohibit the administration from doing this, there's no recourse until the next election.
So what can Republicans do in the meantime? Is it just this campaign, basically emphasizing the disaster at the border? I mean, is this something that, you've been covering this issue. You're very familiar with what happens in Homeland Security Committee. I mean, what can Republicans do, if anything? Or is it just a lost cause unless Republicans win the Senate?
Well, what's very difficult is the fact that they have such a slim majority in the House and a minority in the Senate. But I think what a lot of the immigration enforcement advocacy organizations had been pushing was that no funding for Ukraine, until the U.S. border was taken care of, and that was their leverage, and apparently that leverage is not going to be used. So that, so that, that was their leverage, and apparently that leverage is not going to be used. So, that, so 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 that if Republicans are not going to use the only leverage they have, there really isn't any recourse until the next election. Now, certainly the states have been suing the administration right and left for the disaster at the border, and what's left to be determined is whether the state of Texas's own state law allowing it to enforce certain immigration laws, whether the Supreme Court is going to allow that to stand. So that's really the big open question right now.
Yeah, but it seems like if anyone wants to stop what's going on at the border and actually get our security back and fix this, it's going to take a new president. That's the bottom line at this point.
It's going to take a new president.
At least that's the start.
It's going to take a new Congress.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
And hopefully the damage won't be so irreparable by that time. Yeah. This is the worst. I worked on immigration policy in Congress since 1995, and this is by far the worst border crisis I have ever witnessed in my lifetime.
That's saying something. George Fishman, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it today.
Thank you.
Center for Immigration Studies. It is 6:45, WMAL traffic and weather. That was a sobering conversation, wasn't it?
I know.
There's really nothing we can do. It's over. Yeah. Yesterday there was a hearing on Capitol Hill where Republicans were grilling the president of Columbia University and as well as board members of Columbia University about anti-Semitism on that campus. There's plenty to draw from here. Before the hearing, the students actually delivered a press conference with Chairwoman Virginia Fox. We love her.
My name is Yola Ashkenazi, and I'm a student at Columbia University. You've all seen the wave of hatred for Jews that has swept college campuses in the last 6 months. For Jewish students like myself, we've lived it. For most students, the college years provide an opportunity to find belonging on campus. Columbia, meanwhile, has recognized clubs that say things like, quote, Zionists not invited.
Yeah, and there's more to it. In fact, we're going to talk to one of the mothers of these children, Lori Lowenthal-Marcus, coming up at 7:05. Congressman Jim Banks pointed out that in some of the materials that Columbia passes out, they use this term called Ashkenormativity, which is about Ashkenazi Jewish people, and it describes it as, well, here, listen.
Let me read to you how Ashkenormativity is defined by your you don't know if it comes from students or professors at the school, but Ashkenormativity is defined as a system of oppression that favors white Jewish folks based on the assumption that all Jewish folks are Ashkenazi or from Western Europe. So do you have a response to that definition of Ashkenormativity? Is that appropriate? This is handed out to your students.
By other students. It is not a product of the faculty of Columbia University.
It is handed out to your students.
Oh, that is just too clever by half, because if students on the campus handed out other types of content that is racist or against any other group, there would be a crackdown from faculty. But she kept saying that. Well, we didn't do that.
Well, but you pointed out earlier that that literally in this Ashkenormativity, that they say white Jewish folks, but it's not spelled with Folks. It's spelled with Folx. It's like Latinx. It's like this is pure insanity.
Yeah, because if you spell folks the proper way, that it's triggering in some way to the LGBTQ community. It's insanity.
But they're already insulting the white Jewish students by doing this. But then they want to be like, appropriate in their language.
They're allowed to insult certain people, and it's George Orwell. It's Animal Farm. Some animals are more equal than others. 6:54.
Making sense of your world.
Something you just don't hear anywhere else.
News Talk